Going on, everybody? My name is Matt Jarbo. This is 3 Buck Theater, and one of the hardest parts about covering Star Wars news on YouTube is that a lot of it these days is hyperbolic for effect. Not everything is as doom and gloom as it seems. Not everything is as rainbow sunshines and blowjobs as it seems, and the truth oftentimes falls somewhere in the middle. But ultimately, I think what a lot of people do is they don't always present it in the best possible light. I know I've been guilty of that. Which is one of the reasons why I wanted to make this video, because I do believe that there is a timeline of events in regards to this particular situation that speaks volumes as to where things are right now. And I'm going to catch flag for this, but I am going to call out Ethan Van Sciver one more time, saying here in a video he posted a couple days ago titled "Kathleen Kennedy Insults Family of Carrie Fisher as Star Wars Fans Rage," right? And obviously, you know, people are upset about the way Kathleen Kennedy handled the situation. There's a video clip of her going around saying that Todd Fisher was confused, and they're like, she was insulting the family, she was insulting all this. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe that's accurate. Maybe in part that's okay. That's what happened. But at the same time, not really. Not if you think about it from a production standpoint, if you think about it from a development standpoint, and you also, and this is where it's absolutely vitally 100% important. And at no point did Ethan address this in his video, and I watched it from start to end just to make sure I didn't take him out of context, addressing the time frame of when this stuff took place. Now, I don't know if he overlooked this willingly or on accident, but he overlooked it. And so I want to correct the record, because I feel if we're going to get mad about this, we should at least have all the information to be on, just to be as informed as humanly possible. Now, this particular story here about Todd Fisher speaking out, even pulling from this article on Heroic Hollywood, he says that he thanks JJ Abrams for making Leia's Star Wars Episode 9 return happen. Now, in the interview here, he says that JJ Abrams really made this happen. If I was in any way an inspiration for the final decision to keep Leia part of the story, that's great. I must say at times it felt like a voice crying in the wilderness, which is true. He's been making these statements for quite some time. But the reason why he's been making these statements for quite some time ultimately boils down to this. Lucasfilm was completely caught off guard by Carrie Fisher's untimely passing in December of 2016. She died, I think, about a week or a couple days after Rogue One came out. And so there was a lot of speculation about what was going to happen with Episode 8 and then also Episode 9 coming out a couple of years later, where things were going to go, how they were going to progress. And the fans were definitely curious, because this is an article I pulled from Collider on January 13th, 2017, so a year and a half ago. It says here, Lucasfilm has no plans to digitally recreate Carrie Fisher, saying Lucasfilm has mercifully shot down rumors that the studio is planning to digitally resurrect Carrie Fisher in the wake of the actress's untimely death. Fisher passed away at the age of 60 last month after suffering a heart attack, which has put the folks at Lucasfilm in a bit of a predicament. While Fisher had wrapped filming on Episode 8, General Leia was reportedly going to play a major role in the final film of the new trilogy, a narrative move that makes sense considering her son is the big bad of the revamped franchise. Rumors began emerging that Disney and Lucasfilm were negotiating with Fisher's estate for rights to her digital image, and speculation following that they would take the Grand Moff Tarkin route and render Leia's performance digitally. Thankfully, the studio seems adamant that they will not pursue that obviously terrible idea, and that's true. I mean, people looked at Peter Cushing being used in Rogue One, and they were generally okay with it. But then at the very end of that, you had the CG of Leia when she was like 19. From A New Hope, and it kind of looked a little bit wonky, and it kind of threw some fans off. And this is less than a month after Rogue One, and 3 weeks after her death is when this article came out. Now, according to the statement here from Lucasfilm, they say, we don't normally respond to fan or press speculation, but there is a rumor circulating that we'd like to address. We want to assure our fans that Lucasfilm has no plans to digitally recreate Carrie Fisher's performance as Princess or General Leia Organa. Carrie Fisher was, is, and always will be part of the Lucasfilm family. She was our princess, our general, and more importantly, our friend. We are still hurting from her loss. We cherish her memory and the legacy as Princess Leia, and will always strive to honor everything she gave to Star Wars, which is the right statement to make. Lucasfilm made the perfect statement there. Now, one of the big problems with this ultimately is what was going to happen with Episode 9, because this is from January 2013. We already know that Episode 8 was currently in post-production. We know that it was coming out a year later. We know that she'd already filmed her stuff. So what were they going to do? What were they going to do? Were they going to digitally recreate her and bring her into the movie? People were pretty much thinking that one, right? Well, they also had to go back and very much work on trying to make this thing fit, right? And they, again, we weren't all the way done with the controversies as they were going to happen with this particular film. Now, this takes us to a Hollywood Reporter article from April 7th, 2017, where it says here, this is when Todd Fisher first brought it up. Okay, so in the article that Ethan referenced and the video that I've seen other people's reference, which is this particular interview with Kathleen Kennedy, what we know is that this is from, April 14th, which we're going to get to here in a second. So it's not recent. It's not recent that this was happening. It's not like this was just last week or a month ago that Todd Fisher was like, no, we want Carrie Fisher. She's going to be in the movie. And Kathleen Kennedy saying no to that and calling him confused. This was very much during the early days of restructuring what was going to happen with Star Wars Episode 9. And look, we're going to get to that whole thing here in a second, but let's take a look at this article. Now, it says here that the late star's family has given permission to Lucasfilm to use recent footage of the actress to bring Leia into the 2019 film. Now, it doesn't say which recent footage that is, by the way. It doesn't say what that is, but now we pretty much know that that was footage from Episode 7. Again, this is, kind of fresh information for April of 2017. It says, Leia's journey will not end in December's Star Wars The Last Jedi, says Carrie Fisher's brother. He told the New York Daily News that he and Carrie Fisher's daughter, Billie Lourd, had given Disney and Lucasfilm permission to use recent footage of the actress in 2019's Star Wars Episode 9. She'd already completed work on The Last Jedi, saying both of us were like, yes, how do you take her out of it? And the answer is you don't, Todd Fisher says. Fisher also told the Daily News that he was unsure how big of a role his late sister would play in Episode 9, which remains shrouded in mystery and is being directed by Colin Trevorrow. Now, keep that in mind, Colin Trevorrow. That shows you how old this article is, right? So at the time, you could probably tell that they were still in the process of trying to figure out the story and to figure out a way to make it work. And this was probably right around the time where Colin Trevorrow was having trouble finishing the script, right? He was having trouble rewriting it in order to get the right things down there. Now, it goes on to say here, too, that even in March of 2017, Disney CEO Bob Iger said that The Last Jedi is not being changed in the light of Carrie Fisher's death. And so we know that they had locked it into place, so they had at least locked down Episode 8, and they weren't worrying about that at that point in time. Now, here's where we get to the article about Kathleen Kennedy from April 14th, where she had denied that particular rumor. And you got to understand, even going back here to this article from January 13th, so literally 3 months prior, they had already been working. There'd already been this rumor floating around. And I think ultimately that's what Kathleen Kennedy was referring to when she talked about this, because they didn't have anything locked down in place yet. Now, it says, we will see a lot of Carrie in Episode 8, Lucasfilm president said. Carrie Fisher will not be appearing in Star Wars Episode 9, Lucasfilm head Kathleen Kennedy said on Friday. The announcement came during an interview with ABC News and was something of a bombshell, as Todd Fisher, the late actress's brother, previously said his sister would be in the planned 9th installment of the blockbuster franchise. And Kathleen Kennedy said he was confused, saying, sadly, Carrie will not be in number 9. We will see a lot of Carrie in 8. And that is very true. So they'd been pushing to use the previous footage of her, which means that when they announced that Carrie Fisher was going to be in Episode 9, this was Todd Fisher's plan. But when you look at this interview here with Kathleen Kennedy, you got to kind of understand, though, that her job, and I'll catch shit for defending her here, but this is her job. Her job is to protect the secrets of Lucasfilm. Her job is to make sure shit gets made. Her job is to be the executive. Her coming out and saying, confused probably wasn't the right word to use, but it's entirely possible that at the time, and this is where I'm going to argue Occam's razor, why I'm going to push back a bit against Ethan, is that, and other people that have been making these claims, has a lot to do with the fact that with Kathleen Kennedy, this is her job, is to protect the secrets. Her job is to make sure that they can get a workable script, make sure that they can get a workable story, and make sure they could figure out a way to finish the Skywalker Saga after everything kind of went tits up with Carrie Fisher dying, and then ultimately what happened with Episode 8. Now, keep in mind, this was also a solid 8 months to the day before people actually saw Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. So at the time, they did not realize the backlash was going to be there. They did not realize what was going to be done. They did not realize where things were going to go. They were still riding high off of Force Awakens as well as Rogue One, and to them, literally the sky was the limit. So they were probably thinking to themselves at the time, how do we tell this story? How do we make it done? And everything else. And they thought they had enough time and that people would maybe be receptive to like the way The Last Jedi was going to go. They probably thought it was going to be another $2 billion movie, and they weren't expecting the big backlash. And that's, again, one of the issues that's kind of gone on with Lucasfilm. That takes us here to this article from September 12th. Now, this is when JJ Abrams returned to the director's chair, right? Because that was the whole issue with that, is he returned in September 12th. Colin Trevorrow was fired 1 week prior. He was fired on the 5th of September 2015. So again, we're talking an additional 5 months after this interview was when this happened. So what does that tell you? That tells you that for over the summer, Colin Trevorrow was trying to get the story right. He was trying to get it locked down, and was probably just having trouble turning in something that they wanted to use, or that he wanted to use. It says here that Lucasfilm and Colin Trevorrow have mutually chosen to part ways on Star Wars Episode 9. Colin has been a wonderful collaborator throughout the process, but we have come to the conclusion that our visions for the project differ. We wish Colin the best, and we'll be sharing more information about the film soon. So, then it said a couple days later that here comes JJ Abrams, who is going to be coming back in to fix it. Probably because they went to JJ like, how do we fix it? And I'm pretty sure throughout the entire process, he's been involved in the storytelling process, that he's been involved in the entire situation. Now, there's, again, tons of speculation, and even all of this is speculation, and I will grant it that. But for the most part, though, looking at the timeline of events, looking at how Hollywood operates, looking at how studios operate, and just looking how things are, we can see that this current narrative, in referencing Todd Fisher and everything else he said about JJ Abrams, praising him for this, we can kind of see that, that's the storytelling process takes time, because this was July 30th when he, this was yesterday that he praised him, or like 2 days ago that he praised him, the 29th, right? Whereas it was announced that JJ Abrams would be returning to the director's chair literally the 12th of September. So we're talking 10 months later between the announcement. 10 months between the announcement of JJ Abrams coming in and Todd Fisher thanking him for bringing Carrie back in. What does that tell you? In that 10-month period of time, him and Chris Terrio they looked through the footage of, and I'm pretty sure Todd Fisher probably kept recommending it, probably kept telling it to JJ, and JJ probably looked at Chris Terrio and said, like, okay, how do we do this? How do we make this a reality? And that's what they did. They sat there and they figured out how to tell the story and bring her in, and they took the time. Whereas I'm going to probably assume that when it was Colin Trevorrow working with Kathleen Kennedy and maybe Rian Johnson or whoever else was involved in the story group, they were just not able to think of it from the perspective at that moment in time. And I'm going to tell you the reason why for that is because at that moment, you're grieving the loss of a friend. You're grieving the loss of family, and you want to do them right. You want to do by them 100% correct. Now, Todd Fisher and Billy Lord, they wanted to do right by Leia by getting her in the movie. And ultimately, they were correct. Ultimately, they were right. And ultimately, Kathleen Kennedy is wrong. But Kennedy, at that time, again, you have to go and look at it from an executive level perspective. She's like, no, we're not going to see her in episode 9. No, because she can't sit there and say that. She can't sit there and say that when it was so close to the rumors and speculations that they were going to CG her like Peter Cushing in Rogue One. People would have immediately assumed that was the case. They would have immediately assumed that was what was going on. And since the idea there of previous footage of the actress, no one's specifying what it was. Now we know that it was unused footage from Star Wars Episode 7. So we know now what it is. But back then, they didn't say what it was. So again, it was this kind of mishmash of information that was causing a lot of confusion and chaos. Now, listen, I will criticize Ethan. I don't think he was being intellectually dishonest. I just don't think he was following the rabbit trail. I'll be fair on that one. I don't think he was looking past the article headline and any ability to just make fun of Kathleen Kennedy. But in this case, in this specific case, this was an executive making an executive call. Was her use of words probably not the best? Yeah. Calling him confused right, says something. But at the same time, when you're trying to protect a $1 billion franchise and you're trying to not set expectations before the next movie comes out because you don't want that controlling the narrative, you don't want that controlling the press, she probably made the hard call of making that claim, of trying to shout down that rumor in what could only be in her mind, a polite manner, so to speak. Right. But Todd Fisher, you could tell, was pushing from behind the scenes to get it done. And that's great. I have nothing but respect for Todd Fisher, and I think he did an excellent job. So that's kind of where we find ourselves with this particular situation. When it comes to Carrie Fisher and being involved in episode 9, we can see that it's gone through a lot of ups and a lot of downs. But the narrative here that it's that Lucasfilm's attacking Todd Fisher, that Kathleen Kennedy's attacking him, was a one-off comment made to strike down a rumor over a year ago, right? Over almost a year and a half ago. How is that equated to today? It's not. It went through story problems. It went through a director issue, and then it took more time to write the script, and then they were able to find a way to make it to work. This is how Hollywood works. It's an evolving process. It's always an evolving process, and that's where we find ourselves. So, Ethan, I hope the next time, maybe take a few extra minutes and read up on the timeline of events. That's all I ask, and that's what I ask for the rest of you guys too. I ask for the rest of you guys to do that too, because this is where we need to, and I'm gonna get on my soapbox here for a second, but this is where we need to, as not only Star Wars fans, even critics, need to have a fundamental understanding of where things are and what's going on in the timeline of events and the context of the situation. Because if we allow ourselves to go down the pathway of not knowing, of willfully not knowing or not looking or not taking the time. And I'm not saying like everyone's going to be perfect and whatever, because you're never going to be perfect on it, 100%. But it's best to do that. And as people who are on YouTube that talk about this from a position of knowledge and authority on the subject matter, because that's what a lot of us are looked at to by our audience, we owe a responsibility to them to be as intellectually honest as we can and to be sure that we present the facts as they are. Your opinion is entirely yours, and I will never, ever argue back against the opinion. However, having the knowledge is what's going to save us from getting in, spreading false news and fake information. That's all I really want to say about that. But that's the timeline about Carrie Fisher coming back into Star Wars. In my opinion, the truth of coming back into Star Wars. And leave your comments below. Again, they're going to be fun. They're going to be a lot of fun. I'll talk to you guys later. Have yourself a great day, and peace out.